huge week of Studio 10. We've got a lot of hot topics to discuss this morning, but if you are just joining us, you better meet our special guest panellist. It's Lex Marinos, everyone. I was reading before you have an OAM.
Yes.
Joining Jess and Ita with their fabulous Australia Day honours as well. This feels like we're at the bad end of the table.
Does everyone have an AM except for me?
And me. That's the Paris end of the panel.
Well, don't worry, your turn will come. You're just youngsters.
We're youngsters.
Correct.
We're a very, very good company. Good morning, panel. Are we ready to rock and roll?
Morning.
Oh, yes.
Excellent.
Oh, yes.
Let's get into it. Could the weekend's election result in Queensland be the final nail in Tony Abbott's coffin? The LNP is on the verge of losing power. After just one term in office, it sparked a flurry of headlines across the country this morning, with the Herald Sun reporting cabinet ministers are in revolt, ready to replace Abbott with Julie Bishop or Malcolm Turnbull. The Daily Telegraph declaring that the Prime Minister's speech today at the Press Club is a last-ditch hope for survival. Other headlines include Abbott on the ropes, PM crisis deepens, says the Mercury, and no confidence, declares the West Australian. So all of this begs the question, have you lost faith in Tony Abbott as our Prime Minister? Lex, you're our special guest. We might start with you. What do you think?
Well, I think it's a really curious situation. The electorate does seem to be much more volatile than I can ever remember it being. I'm not quite sure what he would have to do at this press club today that would turn all of that around. But at the same time, I can see that's a dilemma for the party because they campaigned so heavily on Labor's change of leadership that to do the same thing now would seem to be hypocritical. And I'm not sure that the electorate likes hypocrisy.
I wonder though if it is so hypocritical, because I think the difference with the Labor Party was that Kevin Rudd being unseated came out of nowhere. It seemed to for the electorate. It was sort of like, oh my goodness. Whereas I think very much with the opinion polls and things, you get this idea that they no longer support Tony Abbott.
I mean, Rudd was a complete surprise, wasn't it? It was a real Brutus act.
Yeah. I mean, Kevin Rudd was obviously unseated for much, much less. He was, you know, riding high compared to where Tony Abbott is now.
But they had big cracks, they hadn't they? Weren't they thrown things at makeup artists? And...
It is, I mean, and there was a little bit of talk, but not necessarily the critical mass that seems to be building now. And it's ironic that the government has made all this talk about, having to prepare the electorate for hard decisions, and the actual decision they've prepared the electorate for the best is to knife Tony Abbott and replace him with either Malcolm Turnbull or Julie Bishop.
But what does he mean?
Do you reckon he'll go, Joe?
With these things, there's a couple of things. He would have to deliver a speech today that rivaled the Gettysburg Address.
But what can that be? What can he say?
Well, that's right. And then even if he does give this incredible speech...
The one thing we don't know, it's how we're going to get Australia out of its current dilemma. And the dilemma is that the electorate doesn't really want to have any cutbacks on the things it feels it's entitled to. But the thing is, we're living way beyond our means, and unless we take the tough economic stance that needs to be taken, we're going to leave a nation in huge debt. Now, that's a very difficult thing to sell, and he hasn't been able to sell it.
But even if he sells it, he can't do it. This is the thing. So even if he gives this speech and says, well, this is what we're going to do, this is our vision, he's still got a hostile Senate that's going to block everything he tries to do anyway. So in a sense, he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. And the critical mass, the destabilisation of the leadership, sometimes these things have a self-fulfilling quality about them.
Let's just go back to when Julia Gillard was the Prime Minister. And she had a very difficult time. She had a minority government, yet somehow she managed to get through a lot of legislation, which is often overlooked. So she had very good negotiating skills, for sure. Yeah. Why is it impossible for the current mob not to negotiate? Given the Senate and given the bloody mindedness, the only way to describe it, of the Labor Party to block everything, and really they have to take some responsibility for the economic mess we're in. Why is it impossible to negotiate? I mean,
but it's just the sheer numbers. So Gillard was able to form an alliance with the Greens where Labor and Greens politics overlapped. Eventually that ended up killing the government because it ended up moving too far to the left. But the Greens are just never going to team up with Tony Abbott's coalition. The Palmer United Party, out of sheer spite, it would seem, or just out of sort of incompetence and unreliability, are not going to give them an easy run. So it's just I feel for the PM, but it is very difficult to see him digging his way out of this one.
The National Press Club speech will be very interesting.
It certainly will. We'll bring you that absolutely tomorrow.